assume that you and I have never met before and you want to introduce yourself to me. What would you say about yourself to somebody that you were meeting for the first time that's a stranger that doesn't know anything about you?
I would say that I am first a mom, I'm a wife, and I run the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect, and that I'm a therapist. And I love doing all of those things.
So you have a busy life.
I do, yeah.
And joyful life?
It is incredibly joyful, yeah. Between my husband and I, we have 7 children, 1 daughter-in-law and 1 grandchild, and it is very full, but there's lots of laughter, there's lots of adventuring, and there's a lot of learning. So, more than anything, there's learning.
What's, or maybe there's not one, I was going to ask, what's the common reaction to somebody when you tell them about what you went through? Is there a common one, or does it run the gamut?
Well, I think that it's two. There are 2 commons. So primarily, if they lived in Colorado, the common response is usually tears or sadness or their own phenomena of the time and experience. And so if they don't live in Colorado or didn't live in Colorado during that time, the other common response is typically like, how are you okay? And usually there's a little bit of awe, which is always wonderful for my sometimes inflated ego of like, how do you survive? And like, it's amazing that you're doing the work that you do, you know, given everything you've been. And so it's usually one of those, and both are equally as, you know, I'm open to receiving either of those.
Does that childhood trauma dominate your life? Is it part of your life? Is it something you find yourself thinking about every day, once a week? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Good question. So, you know, it's hard to know when you make a bowl of soup or a batch of soup. It's hard to know where the chicken is or where the meat is or where the tomatoes are. Once it's all together and brewed and cooked and marinated, it's really impossible to delineate what is what. And my abduction happened, you know, essentially pre-verbal, and everything in my life has been impacted by it, and so it's very hard to pull out which piece is because of that, or because I chose to become a therapist, or because I'm the CEO of the National Foundation to End Child Abuse and Neglect. It's so hard to delineate how much of it is my trauma. I think I went through this for a reason, and I can't imagine not trying to change it, period. And not just kids being kidnapped. I think that is a rarity, but kids being hurt and kids not being heard, and families not, the recognition of the impact of trauma on family and how it doesn't go away. All of those things are things that I have to change, and I have to create through common conversation, because as a culture, it's okay. It's okay that there's imperfections around all of us and that bad things happen. It's what we do with them that matters.
You talked in the book about this idea of always having to be on.
Yeah.
Having to smile and be pleasant and be okay, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that's exhausting.
Oh, boy, is it. There's this obligation, and maybe it's survivor's guilt, maybe it's shame, maybe it's just guilt, maybe it's this internal rage of wanting to fight back and not let my abductor win. But this desire to do something good out of something so gross is very strong. And this constant need to get out there and be on, even when I am just shot, is really prevalent and constant. I've got a good network of people in my world now that support me and help me without shaming and criticizing and or threatening, and that feels good on the on part, that when I'm off, I can be off.
Do people recognize you in public ever?
They used to, but yeah, I mean, there were times, especially in my 20s, when like my car got towed once and I had to go to the car lot, wherever it was, and it felt like Adventures in Babysitting when they showed up and Thor was there, the guy that looked like Thor, he's an auto mechanic, and this guy was like what I would imagine 6'10", right? I over exaggerate, but and bald with tattoos everywhere, including on his face. And he saw my name and he looked up at me and knew who I was, and like put his hands down and came out of the behind there was like a bulletproof window, right? And comes out the door with 5 locks on it and just hugs me and gives me my car keys and sends me on my way.
Did you ever, when that was happening, did you ever wish that people didn't recognize you?
All the time, yeah. I mean, when I got married and I changed my last name, it was like going into witness protection. And I write about that in my book. It was just a breath of fresh air. It's when I went into finance, and I did that for quite a few years and just like didn't do this work. I got divorced about 5 years ago, and so yeah, I went back to my maiden name, and I've just recently got remarried, which has just been so wonderful. And I'm married to an incredible man, and I'm very close with my ex-husband and all of his family, and our families are really tight and spend all of our time together, which is great. But yeah, I still am Poland.
And so you're okay with people seeing your name and making a connection, I guess. I guess you're comfortable with that at least.
Yeah, there will be a time where I buy some farmland with a bunch of trees and become a yoga instructor and meditate every day and paint and write and raise chickens, and there will be a time and when I can be a foster mom to little babies. I look forward to that. But right now I'm okay with being Lori Poland.
I was a little surprised when we talked a few weeks ago, and also in your book, that you used your attacker's name. You said Robert Thorett.
Yeah.
When we talked about him, and as I'm sure you've noticed, there's sort of a movement in this country now among a lot of victims of not acknowledging, the bad people that do bad things in that way. What do you think about him when you think about him?
I had compassion and empathy for him for so long of, man, if somebody would have paused and listened and protected him the way that we need to for all of our children, the outcome would have been different. And then in the last 5 years, I have had 6 other women who have been abused by this man reach out to me and share that they were either he attempted to abduct them, that he did abduct them, and he sexually abused them or sexually harassed them. Because it's 40 years this year. And in the last 5 years, I've met first responders, the 911 operator, other witnesses, other survivors, family members. I have met all of these people, his attorneys, like all of these people. And my empathy for him reduces. I will use his name because he counts on me being silent. He counts on his victims being silent. And Robert Thorett is not somebody that we need to be silent about. The man has caused harm, and he has been harmed, and he continues to cause harm. And he has since harmed more children since he hurt me. And the fact that our systems are designed the way that they are is wrong. And this is just one person. It's just one man out of far too many. And so I am not going to not say his name. I'm not going to do him that justice.
You wrote in the book that for a long time you really wanted to meet him.
I did.
That you wanted to tell him that he wasn't going to win, that you had made the choice to do good in your life. Do you still think that that's what you would say to him if he were sitting here now? That you didn't win? What would you say to him if he were sitting here now?
I would say you did not win. Absolutely. Right now, honestly, Kevin, I'm a little angry at him. I'm angry because, even hearing that before 2008, he harmed another child. That's another child that was, their lives were changed because of one person and a failure of our system to protect us. I'm really mad. And I haven't ever really lived in anger around this. But it's hard. It's hard because it has hurt so many of us. He has hurt so many of us. And I am trying with all of my might to do good by that and to use it for good. But I hear a lot of bad things about the guy. So I don't know what I would do. It would be interesting.
When you in writing the book, as near as I can tell, you didn't hold anything back.
I didn't.
You discussed relationships early in your adult life that failed. You talked about the use of alcohol for a long time to numb your pain. Brutal honesty is the way it struck me, and I guess I wanted to ask you whether that was hard to do, whether that was therapeutic. Talk a little bit about that.
It was very painful and very lonely. And so it was almost like being alone again in an outhouse and having to face it. And as an adult, having to get out of that hole.
You knew going into that was going to be hard for some members of your family, your parents and your brother, and that, but also I'm gathering that it was important for you to tell your story. Can you talk a little bit about that sort of tension between those two things?
Well, it was never my intention to cause harm. I wanted to show how hurt they were by this too, and how from my grandma to my grandpa to my parents and my brother and my cousins, and I just wanted to show how it changed the whole water system. It changed the DNA of everyone. And that was what my goal was. And I feel like for the most part, the feedback-wise, I feel like a lot of people have understood that. In fact, the predominant feedback that I've gotten was how much compassion and understanding people had for my family through the way that I wrote about it. They certainly did not experience it that way, and that really bums me out.
There's a passage in your book where you say, you talked about how difficult this was for your parents and your brother and the pain that they still feel about this. And you said that pain is the reason people want to stop talking, the reason my family asked me to silence myself, let it go, move on, and get over it. And I guess my question is there such a thing as getting over it?
I think that as a culture, it's what we try to do. And I think that when you have pain, it will come out sideways if not addressed. And it's like, the air finds its way to freedom. And there is the way that our society has handled anything that's uncomfortable is to just not look at it. And that is okay for a lot of people. And though that philosophy has caused so much generational harm. There were times throughout life when my brother should have gotten. There were so many symptoms and social and behavioral symptoms that we all experienced that we needed support around. And my family had the belief that, you lean on your family for those things, but it's hard when you're leaning on somebody broken to fix you, and we were all broken together. And they'll probably be mad at me for saying that they were broken, but we were. That is not normal. What we went through was not normal. And we can't treat it as though it was normal, and we needed help. And, you know, it's just unfortunate. And I had to be an adult before I could get that.
All this makes me feel like, in a nutshell, a bomb went off in your family 40 years ago, and the shrapnel is still.
Yeah, we're missing appendages. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you hopeful those relationships can be repaired?
I'm okay with either way. I have had a lot of time and a lot of healing around being okay no matter what. And I have a very strong faith, and I have an incredible system of friends and family that I am very, very close with. And I know that I'm okay either way. And if there is healing, I am all in, and I know that who I am is not ideal for some others, and I have to be okay with that too.
Tell me about your work with the foundation. What does that do for you, for your soul?
My work with NCAN is incredibly challenging and rewarding at the same time. The challenge is that starting any new business takes 5 to 7 years, and I've never started a national organization before, and I've also never started a national organization that continuously talks about my biggest struggle, you know? And so, and not just mine, I'm just saying like the world's biggest struggle, which happens to be mine, which is child abuse. And we are currently in a culture where people are not comfortable talking about child abuse, in part because I think every parent can relate, and in part because I think nearly all of us have a story of hardship in our childhoods. And I think in part because we don't know how to support one another in those stories. And so trying to change the conversation about child abuse and neglect from just being a social issue that happens with Department of Human Services and to minorities and marginalized populations is hard. It is not a requirement for people to share their story in order to do something to end child abuse. It is not a requirement for people to stand on the front of the stage and raise their hand and say, "Me too." It is a requirement that we all do something better for our world's children.